Qui è ora. Qui è dove conoscere significa confrontarsi con le sfide della contemporaneità, ascoltare le nuove generazioni da accogliere nel tempo presente. Ora, Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore. Visita il sito unicat.it.
E allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
Qui è ora. Qui è dove conoscere significa confrontarsi con le sfide della contemporaneità, ascoltare le nuove generazioni da accogliere nel tempo presente. Ora, Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore. Visita il sito unicat.it.
E allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buonasera.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session about truth, consent, and bubble. I would like to welcome you all here in this room and also all the people connected online. In this session, we will try and address a topic in a very short time. We will probably need months and months of sessions and conferences to talk about that. It's the fake news, politically correct, and the consent bubbles, polarization of opinions in which we are more and more immersed. The media world, and not only that, is affected by this, but also intellectuals, politicians, universities, they are all affected by this. Let me introduce the guest speakers, starting with Professor Lucetta Scaraffia, historian and columnist.
Il ministro della
Then Minister Gennaro Sangiuliano, Minister of Culture. And I dare to consider him a colleague, not because I am a minister, but because he was a journalist, he was director of the TG2 TV News. And then we have Giovanni Maddalena, Professor of Philosophy of Communication and Language at the University of Molise. So people say that the world of media is victim of fake news, something that is not real. This is something that has always existed, really, but now fake news is used as a buzzword. It started being used in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected president of the US, and then the Brexit also passed the test of the referendum in Great Britain. So the mainstream media, those that are most read, couldn't foresee these results. So what had happened? The media world tried to justify this by saying, well, some has just told lies to voters and to people, and a lot of media at international level started a campaign against the fake news and saying you only have to believe those that tell you the mere facts. Well, that's wrong for those reading websites and watching the news. This must be clear. There is no medium telling the truth, really. Even just by choosing which fact to tell and which not to tell, that's not the case. And I'm partial anyway. There is this big fight against misinformation, which is something good, but many times it may turn into misinformation itself. Because what happens often, there are people that may not be so interested in the official narration, then they are considered the followers of fake news. And the fake news is considered as false, but that's something maybe that I don't like, that I don't agree with, right, left, any kind of political orientation. Fake news often were written by media, by newspapers, and the digital era certainly multiplied this impact, and a major role was also played by social networks. For many years, these were presented as places of freedom where everybody could give their opinion with a large debate, with the more intelligent opinions emerging. But that was not the case, especially recently, thanks to, or maybe due to, Elon Musk. This idea around the social networks collapsed as these editorial enterprises may be used by their owners to influence public opinion and to do politics. Elon Musk himself was criticized by Commissioner Breton because he had an interview online on X, former Twitter, accusing that they were disseminating hatred and mentioning fake news. But is he deciding what is true and what is false? So this is the debate, and here is the big, we also have the big impact of artificial intelligence that is at the very beginning, and it will give even more vibrancy to what may be considered false, fake news, or misinformation. In parallel, over the last few years, there has been a sort of homogeneity process of thinking, of the general thought, whereby in the political debate only a certain vision is accepted by cleaning up the language. Some words cannot be even mentioned. Some of this, I would say, we are lucky not to mention them, but for others, I won't agree, because this has just made plain language. That's what is called politically correct. People claim that, well, nothing can be said now, but that's not true, especially in a country like Italy. Opinions can still find some space, but there are dividing issues like gender, race, the environment, bioethics. So here there are opinions that are present in the media, at the university, and not others. Some people mention the dictatorship of the politically correct, but the literature, especially from the Anglo-Saxon world, tells us that in some places, if you have a different school of thought, you may even risk to lose your job. Just as in the United States, where many professors, if they have different ideas, they really keep it for themselves. They don't reveal it because it can be dangerous. That's similar to what happens in certain regimes, which normally uphold the idea of being politically incorrect. And social networks always have a major role, moved by algorithms. And polarization is the result of this, with the creation of a lot of bubbles of consensus, especially about topics that divide society. It's my fake news against yours. What you are saying, I don't agree with that, so I'm saying that you are lying, and that's a fake news. That's the system. So we just talk to people that think like we think, and that's the way the algorithm works, because they just put together people with the same ideas, and they reinforce that, and we just get the idea of line up in a front and accusing and attacking. I think it's right, I think it's wrong. It's almost impossible to suspend judgment instead of just going deeper, trying to understand. It's a very uncertain and fragmented situation, and the essence has been lost. Information is manipulated, public opinion may be censored, there may be censorship, and the political power can find it difficult to play a role in here. The situation is serious, but it's not a desperate situation. So today's session is aimed at analyzing the problem and trying to understand whether today, in this context, there is still room for telling the truth, not an anti-fake news, and if one should mention the truth. So I would like to give the floor to our guest, and we'll start with Professor Scaraffia. Could you talk about the relationship between homogenization and politically correct? How did we get to this dictatorship, as someone said, or one individual thought, or this homogeneity of thought that is channeled through the newspapers, the school, the university, and mass culture? Well, first of all, I have to say that as a historian, both fake news and what we today called politically correct, which we used to call conformism, have always existed, because the convenience of taking sides of the side that could be useful to gain positions in one's career or obtain advantages have always existed. The Troy War finished because of a fake news, because they thought that the Greeks were leaving and they weren't. So what today is really new is the extreme extension of such a kind of news through social networks, because without social networks, it would be just like it has always been the case, a group of journalists in public opinion that try to create a public opinion in their favor. Today, the existence of social networks is so vast that it is able to create a great conformism and a more stupid conformism, because it is made by people that have fewer tools in a way. I would like to give you a couple of examples of politically incorrect that really struck me over the last few days. One was just browsing the reviews on the internet of some restaurants where I wanted to go to have a meal. Many of these reviews were of hatred against the restaurant owner, because they were not allowed to go there with one or two dogs. Well, you would understand that a restaurant owner may not be able to let people with a dog in, because then if everybody turns up with a dog, it would be chaos. And it was so surprising to see that nobody answered to these people saying, well, look, there is no way to let people with a dog in just for the respect of all the other people and to have a quiet environment, because nobody dares to say something against the presence of animals. The other example is much more serious. And it is about a fake news that is being published in all newspapers, even in those that should be considered not in favor of Palestinians. And it is a piece of news about Gaza. But anytime there is an act of war by Israel in Gaza, they say the Ministry of Health in Gaza said that there are 200 casualties, among whom a lot of women and kids. First of all, the Ministry of Health in Gaza doesn't exist. There is no Ministry of Health in Gaza. It has been said multiple times. Even if it existed, how could it know about the number of casualties? But everybody repeats this fact that the Ministry of Health of Gaza says X and Y. There are studies saying that if these numbers were true, Gaza would be a country, a place of women and kids, because now there are no men there, because they've been fighting, they are soldiers. So one cannot understand how a country made up of 2/3 of women and kids can engage in a war in such a way. Nobody seems to accept that there are these statistical studies, that there is no Ministry of Health in Gaza, and everybody keeps relaunching this false news, fake news. This is a case of politically correct, because one may be against the war of Israel and that they are really bad against Gaza, but more attention should be paid in this respect. That is, there is no professional accuracy in giving the news. And this is really surprising, because politically correct is based and it is founded a lot on the lack of professionalism, that is, in checking the facts and checking the sources. And the lack of professionalism is the result of social networks. Anyone can write, anyone can say something. If a newspaper said the Ministry of Health of Gaza had said this, there would be a landslide of criticism against it, saying that there is no Ministry of Health in Gaza. So what you mentioned about truth is relevant. Truth has never been at the center of criticism or discussions. It's not a particular moment of history now, really. The particular difficulty is to create a debate that can get us closer to reality and to understand what the real object of the debate is, and so the reality and the truth. There is a lack of procedure that can be used to get closer to truth, but the action, pervasive and threatening action of social networks allow people to say banal things like, no, we're against a restaurant that doesn't allow dogs in, and that there exists the Ministry of Health in Gaza. But very quick question. Do you see an ideological factor behind this? Well, but ideologies have always existed, ideologies and conveniences. Of course, there's a lot of conveniences, political ones, professional ones, and even the ideologies have always existed, really. But there used to be the possibility to destroy the point of view of another person, just presenting a well-sustained counterpart. Now the counterpart is muffled by social networks. The example about the Ministry of Health in Gaza, we can insist and say it doesn't exist, but the social networks would accuse of Zionism, and they would accuse you to be a terrorist, and so there is a very complicated situation. So never before there are now people ready to hit and concretely hit people that mention things that are not comfortable, that are not appreciated. It's not just a very nice debate between different thoughts and different ideologies. Sometimes there are also concrete actions, for example, by laying off people, as was the case in the UK, but also in our country. We have seen people being beaten up. So we are at a moment where there is very high tension.
Grazie. Giovanni Maddalena.
Giovanni Maddalena, you are the author of a theater piece that was performed yesterday. You also wrote a book on fake news a few years ago. You are a philosopher of communication and language. So I'm asking you to explain this phenomenon to us. And I'm asking you, is this really an emergency? Because what we read is fake news emergency. This is something that is very often published by so many newspapers before elections. So can't it be a way to say that something we don't like is false? Thank you. Thank you for the invitation for the first of all. I'm very glad to be here because this is a place that I love for personal reasons as well. Well, with reference to these fake news events, as Professor Scaraffia was saying, it is true. Fake news have always existed. Before the War of Troy, there was the Bible, the question of the apple. And, well, in all cultures, there have always been fake news. But something is actually changing at present. And we need to realize that we are experiencing a big communication revolution. We have had other communication revolutions, but not many. So we had a revolution of the invention of the margins in Paleolithic caves, then writing, printing, mass media, communication, mass media, and then the digital revolution. So it is not easy to digest these revolutions, to understand them. So I wouldn't talk about emergency, and I'd say let's just keep calm and let's try to understand what is actually happening, because we need time. If we follow the debate on the press or on the books of the 15th century, you'll find the same things you find today. Someone proposed in Venice that all books should be banned because they were full of mistakes and because they made people think that they knew things just because they had read a book. But, well, it's more or less what people are saying today. But anyway, obviously there is something to gain with this kind of communication. One of the few things we did understand, I've got this timer in front of me, so, well, I really feel a bit, well, under pressure. But anyway, one of the few things we did understand is that a social network create polarization because each one sees its own reality. There is an interesting documentary called The Social Dilemma. You can see it on Netflix. So just to actually, well, mention platforms like Netflix, that shows, this documentary shows that this is the main issue. Why is there this hatred? Why is there this polarization? Well, we all think that it is impossible that others do not share my point of view. Isn't it obvious that, for instance, there is the Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip? Isn't it obvious? Everyone is saying so, so it must be true. So this is my reality, but someone else's reality can be different. And this is something I always tell my students. I'm a fan of a small Italian soccer team, Torino, And so in my social reality, we are all fans of the same football team, and we're all against the other big football team of the city of Turin. So it's not that we have become particularly evil. The reason is that each and every one of us looks at their own reality, the so-called bubbles. And there is one important thing that I would like to talk about. If we have a lot of information and we do not share the same point of view, this creates division. So if we do not have anything in common, information does not help. Wittgenstein, an important philosopher of the 19th century, said that if a lion spoke English, I would not understand him, because we do not share the same form of life. So this is extremely important. It is not necessarily true that more information means improving the situation, because we do not listen to this information if we do not have anything in common. So we have a fragmentation of common life. With my colleague Guido Giri, who is my co-author, we examined the different possible responses or answers to this crisis. So, well, increasing the control. If you remember, there were flags that were introduced on Facebook during the midterm elections in the U.S. in 2018. There was the room. There were 300 people that were analyzing everything that was happening on Facebook 24 hours a day, but it didn't work. And also strengthening the critical thinking didn't work by creating courses of critical thinking, not only in the universities but also at school level. Doesn't help, actually. I have many friends who do not believe in what is said. They think that there is some kind of scheme against them, and but in the end, they have beliefs that are even worse than the ones I have. They are sure that they are being lied to. So one of the things that might help, and which is part of our common sense, so to speak, and of the ancient social doctrine of the Church, are the so-called intermediate bodies. Where can I accept to be criticized? Well, within my family, among my group of friends, association, a political party. That is to say, I can accept to be criticized by people who belong to the same group, to my group, with whom I share my beliefs. So, for instance, the football fan club doesn't really work the same way, but this is where we accept criticism. So this is something we can use as a starting point to recover our common life.
Ministro Sangiuliano.
Minister Sangiuliano. Giovanni Maddalena was talking about polarization at the beginning of his speech. We talked about the fact that the digital era is a polarizing era. You are a journalist, you are a minister, so I'm asking you, starting from your experience as a journalist and as a politician, do you think that this polarization and its impact has changed the impact on politics and on the world of information? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Well, I share with what Professor Scaraffia said. This is to say, fake news have always been present. And I think that polarization, too, it has always been present. The public debate, however, it has deteriorated if compared to the past. I have worked at the Italian culture of the beginning of the 20th century. Let's think about the works by Benedetto Croce, Corradini, Papini, and Pezzolini. And then the contribution by Gobetti, and then the New Order. Well, the debate at the time was very strong, very bitter. In the railway station in Florence, there was a debate that was so strong that people started to fight. It included the contamination of the different points of view of the main actors of the time. If you read one of the first issues of Rinascita after the Second World War, Togliatti used very strong words against Benedetto Croce, but it was a high level of debate. The technical schemes imposed by social networks, the fact that you have to either say yes or no, and there is nothing in between. So on Twitter, you just have a certain number of words for what you want to write, so you cannot really explain everything. So this is what polarization is. And we cannot, we should actually differ fake news with diverging opinions. I recently read the new censorship by Daniel de Benoit, who talked about the police of journalism, those who are always ready to say, you can't say that, you can't write that because it's not politically correct. So I've always said this. The strongest party is the party of the politically correct that has created schemes out of what they believe to be the truth and is against anyone who says something different. So if we look at the history of humanity, development, growth, normally are the result of diverging positions. Those who were not believed were then capable of create certain truth also in the scientific sector. During the pandemic, at the beginning, it was said that the virus had a natural origin, but someone, I'm not a scientist, but that's what I believed myself, well, maybe we should actually verify if this is true. Then, as a director of the TV news TG2, that I wanted to verify whether the virus did have natural origin, I was criticized. The ministers at the time said, "You cannot say something like this. It's false. It's not correct." So then, in the end, we found out that Joe Biden has asked the two most important agencies in the U.S., CIA and FBI, to verify this. And we have the reports on their websites that this is not yet certain. The virus could be created by a mistake in a laboratory or have a natural origin. So these two possibilities are still valid. So my idea, my desire to verify was legit. And another, well, small episode, some kind of fun fact if you want. On the social network, well, it is obvious that we have fake news on social networks. Sometimes you can take legal action against those who have written these news. But what is really dramatic is that the media, the newspapers, which should have an assessment, a verification of the news they publish, actually then follow fake news. The General Director of Museums, when I was already a minister, asked me to verify an exhibition on the eternity. It was an exhibition of Greek and Roman archaeology in the Mediterranean basin with works coming from Greece, Tunisia, and so on. And a newspaper, Il Manifesto, had this title, the fascist exhibition of Minister Sangiuliano. So this exhibition was actually organized 3 years before I became a minister, because, well, exhibitions are planned and organized with a certain period of time, because you need to organize everything, you need to find the funds. So I had just inaugurated the exhibition, but actually I hadn't really wanted it. It's not I wasn't the one who actually organized this exhibition. I don't understand what could be called facets in that exhibition. I don't understand really. It was an exhibition on archaeology that had been organized by scientists and archaeologists. So I don't understand. But in a way, the piece of information here becomes a prisoner of a scheme. We would like to have an ideology, because an ideology is a philosophical system that can be translated in a political way, but it is something that is to be found in the world of ideas. When in the 20th century we had the season of ideologies, I think about Norberto Bobbio in the ideological profile of the Italian 20th century. He mentions Benedetto Croce, and he says that in juxtaposition to positivism, Benedetto Croce said, we finally breathe in the open air now. So that's what we need. We need a clear air that makes it possible for us to have a dialogue on our ideas. But I am afraid that this issue of polarization and fake news and of the dictatorship of what is called the politically correct is just a part of a more complex issue, that is to say, the decay of the West that was denounced by Splendor, because I don't think in China they have this problem, because the way of thinking of Xi Jinping is now part of the constitution in China. So what Xi Jinping thinks is part of the Chinese constitution, so there is no problem there.
Lì c'è una sola verità e basta.
So there is just one truth there. Professor Scaraffia, we were talking about the polarization of opinions, and this seems to make it impossible to call things by their names. We can no longer just tell or give an account of something objective. There are things that you cannot actually simply talk about. You need to say whether you're in favor or against. And you cannot go deeper. For instance, race, gender, bioethics. So what do you think? Is it still possible to have an objective account of something? Yes, of course we can, but you sometimes we have the problem that we actually give up the fight. We are afraid of public opinion because the public opinion looks like something that cannot be overcome. And I will give an example which I believe is extremely significant. That is to say, the theme of the end of life, which is a moral theme that is now extremely important in the Western world at the moment. It is a new theme, actually, because it was something that did not exist in the past. There was not the possibility to prolong the life of human beings with technological and scientific and medical tools on the one hand, so people just died more easily, because actually sometimes this leads to just a prolonging the illness or the disease, and but there is also the possibility which wasn't there in the past, to give people death without giving them pain. As you know, there are some industries, so to speak, in Switzerland that for 3,000 euros promise a pain-free, painless death. So these is something new, and now death is somehow seen as a right, like any other right, something that we can decide upon, we can manage. So until now, no one has thought that the right to die could be seen as a standard right of any human being. We don't have the right to be born. No one asks to be born. In any possible case, you know that also in some specific cases like assisted pregnancies, well, it's not a baby that has asked to be born. And death as well is not a right. We cannot dispose of our human life. It's part of the 10 Commandments. So do not kill. That means also do not kill yourself. So this is a principle that is at the basis of all human rights. So if this right is not guaranteed, all the other rights might fail. So this is one of the most fundamental themes of our modern civilization, but it is not discussed this way. It's not seen as something dramatic, fundamental. All the themes, the confrontations that have to do with the end of life are compared with other aspects. So the suffering, the unbearable suffering linked to illness. But we know that today we have treatments that can cancel this suffering. And then there is the question of equity. People say those who have money can go to Switzerland and pay 3,000 euros. Poor people cannot do that. So we can give poor people the chance to die in Italy when they want to. So there is this trend to change bioethical fundamental themes concerning life and death into problems of equity and equality. It was the same with abortion in the past. The rich people could go outside of Italy to get an abortion, so people wanted to have the right to abortion in Italy. So now the right to abortion has to be seen as it is, that is to say, as a dramatic moral issue. So the fact that what is politically correct makes us face the most fundamental themes of our society as minor themes, because the problem of equality is a problem that concerns, for instance, people's income and the distribution of resources. So these themes are taken down from the high-level category of life and death that qualify a society, and they become themes that connected with the redistribution of resources. So I must say that this new form of the manual of the end of life proposed by the Academy of the Catholic Academy of Life. I do share some of their ideas, but not the way they present all of this, because they talk of this just like something that can be mediated at political level, and they actually make our fundamental themes something trendy, something fashionable, and that's the importance and the fundamental existence of these themes is no longer taken into account. So this is something that is seen today, and we do no longer have the right to discuss our fundamental values.
Minister, this difficulty that Professor Scaraffia has mentioned is evidence of the fact that has been mentioned since the very beginning, that there's any debate, any issue is constrained within bubbles outside which there is no way to have a dialogue with people having a different opinion. So other things are considered. So this is a very important topic on which politics and institutions can do something. So now, as a minister, not as journalist now, what can be proposed, truly proposed at a cultural level without being ideological, that is, without imposing from the top a certain vision of things or without censoring what is not considered appropriate? Well, I am against the Ministry of Truth. That's not the role of politics. Politics should create spaces and cultural infrastructure within which ideas can be debated freely. Some months ago, an exhibition about Tolkien was promoted. We had more than 90,000 in Rome and more than 100,000 visitors in Naples, and then it will be in Turin. And we had really a lot of newspapers against it. Well, that helped us because just criticizing it, then everybody was wanted to see the exhibition. And when people visited the exhibition, they were really surprised. Even Pope Francis quoted Tolkien in one of his speeches and has always expressed himself in favor. Even Barack Obama said to be a passionate reader about Tolkien. We also had an exhibition about Giovanni Gentile, and we will have one about Gramsci. We have a lot of proposals, and politics must be giving infrastructure, efficient school system, efficient universities, and cultural spaces. For example, what we're doing with museums, creating new museums and strengthening existing ones, creating spaces for dialogue for young generations where ideas can really be exchanged. Politics must not play the role of the Ministry of Truth, saying this is good and this is bad. No, all opinions should be freely expressed in the context of public debate. What we can try and do is to help, rather than being persuasive, try and help and enhance the quality of public debate, as was the case some decades ago or in the 20th century. A strong, harsh, conflicting debate, like in the character of Don Camillo and Pepone in Italy. A debate with quality. When we consider the trends of social networks, we may do that on a certain day, but do we consider the trend of demography, the trend of the environment, of the big infrastructure, of citizens' mobility, that is, the big issues that have a great impact on our life and on our future? How do we think? How do we imagine that in the future? These are divisive issues in the society which should be considered in these debates to get to a common ground. Instead, trends are considered on issues that could be easily disregarded. And this is not just about politics. Also, intellectuals should play this role. There is an issue of accountability in this respect, because the future is being built on many other things, and not just by taking positions over gossip or the role of other influencers. What about the role of media? Instead of dictating tendencies and trends, they follow the trends of social networks, which are created by algorithms. These are small bubbles that then are made so big. Just 20 insults online then are made gigantic, and we talk about a shitstorm that is delivered online. So the media, can the media get back to having a useful role? I still believe in the function of journalism and its role. This is the job I chose to do, and I believe in journalism as a form of mediation. It is a place where issues are addressed in a serious and organic way, getting to the details, and that should be the role of journalism. Unfortunately, I have to recognize that there is a crisis in the world of newspapers, and that results into the problem of media following marginal issues instead of making an effort to consider the big issues and putting them under the spotlight for the general public. So the role of journalism should be this. It should not just to summarize a certain reality and propose it to others, but it should be to enhance the debate around reality. Thank you. So let's conclude this session after listening to so many hints and ideas, talking to Giovanni with a very easy question. What is the truth? No, just kidding. Well, in 8 minutes, I shall provide an answer. No, 10 minutes. Well, given the context that has emerged from what you have said here and what we live today, is there still space for telling the truth? I agree with the minister that there is no need for a ministry of the truth, but is there still a space for truth, and is it still useful to tell the truth? Well, I agree with the minister, but there is no the Ministry of the Truth, but there exists the New York Times. In fact, something that really struck me is that in 2017, after decades of defense of the total multiplicity of ideas and versions and the absolute defense of an ultra-postmodern hermeneutics, after the victory of Trump, the advertising campaign of the New York Times is "The truth is hard." And there was a series of adjectives used with the word truth, whereby that campaign that was called "The Truth is Hard" really seems to be a club that hits you. So the idea is that the Ministry of the Truth doesn't exist, but there exists a general conformism, and this conformism can be imposed. So in fact, what I always say, I wish we were in the 90s nihilism with multiple interpretations, but after the attack to the Twin Towers, and even more so during the social network era, due to the technical system behind the social networks, a great conformism has emerged, just to use the term that we used before. And this is a very important ethical conformism, so it is super difficult to talk about certain issues at all. Instead of answering the question, what is the truth, maybe I may mention another point And that is that there is a big philosophical issue underpinning all this, which is a very old issue of ancient philosophy between realism and nominalism. Realism means that there is a close relationship between things, their names, and the meaning of these things. And nominalism is when these things are separated from each other. The contemporary version that has been promoted so much during the 60s, 70s, especially in French thoughts, and then moving to the United States, is that instead reality can be built with many interesting things that derive from this nominalist detachment. Pasolini used to say something that I really want to share. When talking about sexual freedom in the 60s, he used to say, just be careful, because there is this detachment of the names, of the meanings, and of the things. We use swear words sometimes. We use these words linked to sexual organs or sexual acts, and we use them in our everyday language. And as if he were talking to young people all the time, he was saying, they are just betraying you. They're just cheating you because you are using those words as if they had no reference, and they meant nothing. But doing so, they deprive you of the mystery of one of the most important things of human beings, and they deprive you of its revolutionary force, revolutionary power. So the fact that it was a real revolution, the idea of Pasolini was that if you separate the names from their reference to things and their meaning, what happens is that you have nothing in your hands. And I think that this is the question at the end of the day, because everything that is taught in communication is that the medium many times creates a message. There is a construction of reality. For example, when I lay the chairs in this way, there won't be a violent debate instead of having very opposing positions. So there are so many things that can be built, that can be designed, but at the end of the day, we have to decide between these two things, whether it is reality that creates communication or vice versa. And just to mention one last point, perhaps we should try and find an agreement on the truth. And the problem is not that the truth is hard, that's not the case. But to be so, regarding what we mentioned about intermediate bodies, it always has an affective dimension. There is a statement by Edith Stein that said, do not accept as reality things without love, and don't accept as love things without reality. One thing without the other always creates a destructive lie.
Ministro, voleva...
Mr. Minister, would you like to add something? No, I would propose the theme for another debate, hidden truth, because there are so many different truths that do not emerge in the public debate because it's not convenient. So, for instance, Trump, we have talked about Trump many times, but Trump, for a long period of time in his life, was a Democrat, was a member of the Democratic Party. Hillary and Bill Clinton were at his wedding. His father became an entrepreneur because he supported a Brooklyn lawyer and made him the governor of the state of New York. So there is actually Trump has nothing to do with the Republicans with the party of Abraham Lincoln. Nothing at all, but nobody talks about this. Thank you. I would like to thank all our guests that showed us that we can look at things and at certain themes in a way that goes beyond these bubble of consent we were talking about. And we can actually look for the truth through dialogue and discussion. Thank you everyone for being here, for following us online. And I would just like to remind you that the meeting needs your participation. So when you walk around here in the fairgrounds, look for the Donauora stations. Thank you and good night, everyone.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Qui è ora. Qui è dove conoscere significa confrontarsi con le sfide della contemporaneità, ascoltare le nuove generazioni da accogliere nel tempo presente. Ora, Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore. Visita il sito unicat.it.
E allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
Qui è ora. Qui è dove conoscere significa confrontarsi con le sfide della contemporaneità, ascoltare le nuove generazioni da accogliere nel tempo presente. Ora, Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore. Visita il sito unicat.it.
Allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite